welcome. I'm Pavni Mittal. Today we continue the International Women's Day special on Storyboard. But before we begin, here's a quick recap of yesterday's episode that focused on the woman consumer.
I think the biggest story in consumer India is the pace of change of women right across the board. And I think the pace of change of women has been far greater than the pace of change of men. And so I think marketers then need to reevaluate power equations in households, what kind of decision making women can actually do, how you can give voice to them through products and brands and so on. And that's really it.
Madhukar, you know what Rama is saying, are these all these sort of almost truisms finding their way into briefs that you write for products and services?
Absolutely, absolutely. Just build on what Rama said. The truth of the matter is the woman is the decision maker on a large number of household products, and that's been there for the last 20, 25 years. But one is finding in the last 20 years, certainly in the last decade, for example, women are becoming decision makers and target audience for products hitherto not seen to involve women. Right. Take finance, for example, take automobiles, take mobiles. The whole lot of new categories are seeing women taking their independent decisions for them. So it's absolutely the most potent spending group in society. It has been in the past, but with growing independence, growing education, okay, women are able to make complete independent decisions in lots and lots of new categories.
Have marketers actually done enough by way of product and business design to ride this wave, to look at this, to shape business direction? I would say no, not yet. I mean, we should be gadgetizing households much more. We should be actually selling far more empowerment tools to the rich and the middle housewives. We should be doing far better in terms of financial services.
You can catch that entire episode on YouTube and our social media pages. On the show today, advertising and gender sensitivity and how these women are making it count. There is increasing awareness among consumers and emphasis by regulatory bodies, including the government, on sensitive portrayal of women in media. The conversation around stereotyping or objectification of women has grown significantly over the last 2 years, which is why it's crucial for brands and their agency partners to stay alive to these voices and be ahead of the curve. Listen in to Director of Population First, an NGO that runs a girl-child campaign called Laadli, Dr. L Sharada, BBDO India's Chairman Josy and JWT South Asia CEO Colvyn Harris on how advertising can be more sensitive to women.
Start with you, Dr. Sharada. When you started Laadli, what is it that you expected advertising agencies and advertising to do?
Basically, when we looked at the advertising, we found that it was being driven by stereotypes. I think it is much easier to fall back on stereotypes because they are accepted. People feel that way. Majority of the people feel that way. But in a changing social scenario, there are a lot of, what are stereotypes basically? They are generalizations, you know, which sort of see everybody in a uniform perspective. But in India, with the changes that are happening, there are many gender equations which were emerging, like within the families, between the spouses and everywhere. And that was required also, because if you really want to build a more democratic, more equal, more egalitarian society, we have to challenge these stereotypes. But that was not happening at all. So the basic thing that I did was first to look at the way, because the Indian sex ratios were falling so badly. And then when I looked at the gender stereotyping of girls and boys below 10 years of age in the advertising, I found that most of the times it was always the boy who was shown. Boys were shown with celebrities, boys were shown with promoting products on their own and in various shapes and sizes, etc. But girls were very stereotyped as, you know, cute little girls always holding the hand of the father or mother, promoting the same product as the mother.
So Colvyn, how do you react to this? Sort of looking at what Laadli is saying, how is advertising dealing with the changes in society?
So I think fundamentally, firstly, it starts with the way society operates or behaves and what they believe is right or wrong, or in advertising, how you want to promote or project a certain brand or product. But it starts from our perspective, it's fundamentally what we believe is right and what is wrong. So I think our projection has always been what is right for a brand, what is right for a business. And from that perspective, none of the clients or people who actually own brands would like to gender stereotype in a sense where there is a negative portrayal of women. So it starts with a clean approach to how we want to approach this. The other element is what you see, what is user imagery and actual users. So advertising glamorizes an actual user, and you see yourself in that brand. But the intent is never to try and project women or the girl child or anybody in a way which is not true. So I think the essence is we try to do the right thing. We rely on what we want that brand to stand for, speak. The clients and brands we work with approach it from a perspective it must be right, it must be correct. Then along the way, there are many other influences, cinema being one of them, and others which, muddy this projection to some extent.
Right. Josy, isn't it what we're seeing is a change in society, therefore advertising being forced to change? I mean, it is and it should be.
Well, I mean, firstly, there's greater, sensitivity whenever we write a script or, discuss anything to do with communication where women play a central role in that communication, or even if she's playing a, supporting role in that communication. But for us, as an agency, we go one step forward. We try to what we call create a new reality. It's a reality that we want to live in, where we look and project a women's role in a way that's a little ahead of what actually is going on. And in that way, we try and create a more positive world for tomorrow. And so we are very, very conscious as an agency. Ajay and I spend a lot of time looking at looking at scripts where women are involved, and we find the role of a mother as a friend, the role of a wife as an equal, or sometimes even ahead, all very important issues to discuss in a script over and above its role in building the brand.
Sure. Colvyn, before I come to Dr. Sharada, we've seen actually advertising perhaps being ahead of the curve, without getting beaten by law and so on and so forth, suddenly in the last 3-4 years, treating women a lot better, looking at the girl child better. Do you think advertising is not getting enough credit for what it's doing?
Actually, I tend to agree with that because if your fundamental approach is right, it finally shows itself in the projection. Now, if you look at the subliminal messaging which is in advertising, yes, there is humor. Yes, there are moments where you're trying to propagate a benefit of a brand. But I don't think any agency will knowingly try and attempt to show women in a manner which is derogatory. Now, there have been instances, and they're there for all to see. And then you have a watchdog like ASCII. Somebody will pull it off. So the cost of failure when you try and push the boundaries under the hat or the guise of creativity. That doesn't work. I think there's an evolution. All of us know what is right. I think there's an evolution in many areas, but where reality takes over is in cinema. And that reality is where I think advertising gets its, let's say, it gets the stamp that sometimes we don't project women correctly. I think we do. There are very few ads where we don't.
Right.
Cinema goes into reality, which you see, and you confuse the two. So it's a spread. It's an ocean out there. You need everybody doing the right thing.
Josy and Colvyn, I'm going to ask you both the same question. Is there a growing upside in showing both sexes equally in lots of communication? Is there an upside where the male you always had, you treat the woman better, and there's a upside for the brand where the woman doesn't, even maybe a small segment of women got upset with an ad which showed women in poor light. Is that an upside, and is that something that all of you are riding now?
So every time there's a sort of social upheaval, it creates new opportunities. And I think as creative people, you tend to sort of, react and embrace those opportunities. And you say, hey, this is good. And so you use the upside to your advantage. Sometimes you wonder if you are overdoing it. But you feel that maybe it's good because, in a way, it is pushing change for the better. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, but then it comes to the other bit. You've seen a few brands, not very many,
Yeah.
who are going over the top to another extreme,
Right.
who are showing women in a supremely aggressive and modern mode.
Correct.
And they're not the women you see next door and walking
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
Why do brands taking advantage of the new India and saying, okay, let's go over the top to get benefit rather than stay flat or with the curve?
I think it's a point you made, Anand, which is that there are many Indias and there are many types of women. And we know about the tiger mom being a reality in India, especially with the competitive environment in which kids are operating. So when you see an ad where a woman is, virtually a man in the way she approaches a son's education or whatever else she's doing, you wonder what happened to the father. Where is he? I don't know. What kind of a father is he? But it does sort of stimulate conversation and make you think about the role of the mother, the role of the woman. So I think it's good because it is a reaction to a society that's increasingly competitive.
Colvyn,
Just to add to this,
yeah, sure.
if you look at the many Indias in which we operate, I think the advertising piece is the smallest piece of your issue. The larger piece is when you go beyond, the metros and you go out into the villages. That's where the damage is there. Now, how do you address that? You address it by a general portrayal, across anything which is a media form. You take the news, any story around women, to my mind, goes against the grain, right? The things which women are subjected to. Now, that's a society which needs to change. The advertising bit, finally, okay, there's subtext or there are elements which don't project, women always the best. But I can tell you it's not derogatory or it's not harmful enough as when you look at the counterpoint of what you see on the news channels. And you see of the damage being meted out to women for no fault of this.
Right.
I think, I would like to disagree with you. This subliminal messaging is so very, unconscious or something. So it impacts us in a way which I'm sure that is the reason why we are working with the media, we are working with the films, we are working with the various arts and other. We are not just concentrating on advertising in Laadli, we are concentrating on various other media also. I'm not asking for a politically correct advertising, I'm not asking for a bland and boring advertising, but using the creativity, can we do something about it?
Josy, you agree with what Colvyn said on the fact that it's a society around us which needs to change, and advertising has a very small role to play.
I think everything counts. So,
Right.
While Colvyn's points are important about, the larger role of many other communications, I think we have a very powerful role in our business. And I think it's, for me, I'd rather concentrate on the change that I can create and see if, I can make a difference. That's how I would look at it.
Dr. Sharada, Josy and Colvyn, thank you so much for joining us, and let's revisit this a year from now and see where it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anand.
Thank you.
The big lesson there, consumers will scrutinize ads increasingly and brands that seem insensitive will be voted out. Time for a quick break here. Coming up ahead, influential women in business and marketing on the road ahead for women in the boardroom.